The lights in the studio were warm and bright, casting a soft glow over the sleek set of The View. It was Tuesday morning, and the audience buzzed with excitement as Julia Roberts took her place at the table, her signature smile lighting up the room like a marquee. Before we dive in, subscribe. Dressed in a tailored, eco-conscious blazer, and with her unmistakable charm, she was there to promote her latest Netflix drama, a film about a group of passionate climate activists battling powerful corporate interests. The conversation began effortlessly. Whoopi Goldberg leaned in with that familiar mix of curiosity and admiration, praising Julia's powerful performance in the new project. The hosts took turns highlighting her long-standing career, filled with iconic roles, critical acclaim, and enduring box office success. For the first 15 minutes, it was a warm, almost cozy exchange. Celebrity anecdotes, gentle humor, and the kind of friendly promotion that daytime viewers had come to expect. Sunny Hostin commented on how Julia had gracefully transitioned from America's sweetheart into a thoughtful activist and producer. Alyssa Farah Griffin mentioned how Julia's roles often centered around strong, justice-seeking women. The conversation lingered pleasantly in the space of mutual admiration. Laughter came easily, and the studio audience responded with approving claps at every lighthearted moment. Then came Joy Behar. She leaned back in her chair, lips curled into that signature smirk, the kind that often preceded a shift in tone. "Julia," she said casually, "you've been really outspoken about climate change lately, which is great and all, but don't you think it's a little, I don't know, contradictory? You're flying around in private jets while talking about reducing carbon footprints." The air changed. Julia's smile faltered, not completely, just enough to register. The tension was subtle but unmistakable. She adjusted slightly in her seat, keeping her voice calm and composed. "Well, Joy," she began, her tone still diplomatic, "I try to be very mindful about the choices I make. I offset my emissions, support reforestation programs, and invest in clean energy initiatives. None of us are perfect, but I do what I can." Joy wasn't satisfied. She leaned forward, pushing just a bit harder. "But isn't that just rich people's guilt? You know, paying for carbon credits to make yourselves feel better, while still living a lifestyle that creates more pollution than most of us will in a lifetime?" A flicker of something, disbelief, irritation, maybe both, crossed Julia's face. She didn't lash out, not yet. Instead, she took a breath and kept her tone steady. "I think we all have to find a balance between our lives and our values," she said. "I use the platform I have to bring attention to important issues and support real-world solutions." "Platform," Joy repeated, scoffing. "Softly. That's the word they all use. My platform. But what does that actually mean, Julia? Flying to Cannes for a premiere and planting a tree doesn't make you an environmentalist. Meanwhile, you've got multiple properties, constant travel, and a footprint the size of a small country." A quiet ripple moved through the set. Whoopi shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Sunny glanced at the producers off camera. Alyssa gave a tight, polite smile. Everyone recognized the moment. A line had been crossed, or at least approached. Julia kept her composure. "My work includes more than planting trees, Joy. I've helped fund clean water projects, lobbied for green legislation, and supported grassroots organizations." Joy cut in, her voice louder, dripping with mockery. "Oh, please, Julia. That's the standard PR checklist. Meanwhile, you people are always the first to lecture working-class folks about driving pickup trucks. Don't you see how tone-deaf that is?" Sunny tried to redirect. "I think it's important we focus on Julia's film." But Joy wasn't done. She was enjoying the shift, feeding off the growing discomfort. "Or maybe this isn't about helping the planet at all," she said. "Maybe it's just about making wealthy liberals feel better about themselves. Activism as therapy. It's easy to preach when you're living in a Malibu mansion." Julia's back straightened, and the shift in her posture was unmistakable. She wasn't smiling anymore. Her eyes narrowed just slightly, her voice sharpening. "You have no idea what I do or don't do," she said quietly. "You talk about hypocrisy, but what exactly do you do with your platform, Joy, other than tearing people down?" The audience stirred, a few murmurs, some gasps. It was clear now. This was not going to be a typical celebrity appearance. Joy leaned in, sensing she had struck a nerve. "I use my platform to speak honestly, something Hollywood desperately needs. You all live in bubbles and play pretend for a living, then act like experts on everything from climate change to politics. Maybe sit a few out. Julia looked away for a moment, gathering herself. When she looked back, her voice had risen half a tone, more direct now. I've spent my own money, millions of dollars, on climate solutions. I've changed how I live. I've dedicated time and energy to causes that matter. What have you done besides sit in that chair and mock everyone trying to do something meaningful? Alyssa tried to step in. Maybe we can find common ground. I think both perspectives. Julia didn't let her finish. Her voice now carried a firmness that commanded silence. There aren't two sides here, she said. There's a difference between being critical and being cruel. And what Joy's doing isn't perspective, it's spite. That landed hard. Even Whoopi was silent now. Joy's tone turned icy. Oh, save us the victim. Routine. You're not some selfless crusader. You're an actress who gets paid millions to cry on camera and then expects the world to take you seriously when you switch out of costume and start lecturing the rest of us. Julia stood. The movement was sudden, unexpected. The audience collectively gasped. You could feel the tension tighten, like a wire pulled taut. The camera operators didn't know whether to pan or zoom or cut to commercial. Julia stood tall, calm, but clearly incensed. You're right, Joy, she said. I do play pretend for a living, and in doing that, I've brought people joy, inspiration, and yes, awareness to important causes. But when you pretend to be a journalist, all you create is division. The room went silent, even the background hum of the studio, audience rustling, producers communicating silently with headsets, cameras subtly adjusting angles, seemed to fade into stillness. Julia remained standing, her eyes locked on Joy, who was still seated, blinking but unmoved as though calculating her next move. Whoopi, usually the steady anchor in moments like this, didn't speak. Her expression was unreadable, though her hand hovered near her coffee mug as if to signal a readiness to intervene, if necessary. Joy finally spoke. Wow, she said, drawing out the word. So now you're giving lectures on journalism too? Julia didn't blink. I'm calling out cruelty dressed as commentary. You think that's journalism? Joy stood now, slowly, deliberately, never breaking eye contact. I think it's honesty, the kind you Hollywood types aren't used to hearing. Julia tilted her head slightly. Honesty? No, Joy, this isn't honesty. This is bitterness. This is the sound of someone who confuses being confrontational with being brave. And those aren't the same thing. Joy's face hardened. I've been doing this show longer than you've been saving the world one photo op at a time. And in all that time, Julia said, her voice now edged with a rare steel. Have you ever once tried building something instead of tearing it down? Critique is easy, cynicism is easy, but using your voice to create change, that takes more than snark. The audience didn't know whether to applaud or hold their breath. They did a little of both. Joy crossed her arms, her tone growing more defensive. You want to make this personal? Fine. Let's go there. You have multiple homes. Each one of those houses eats up more electricity in a month than most of America does in a year. You jet off to film festivals, premieres, charity galas. Then you come here and tell people to turn off their lights and drive hybrids. I've never told anyone how to live, Julia countered. I've shared what I'm doing. I've used my influence to raise awareness, to help fund real solutions. Am I perfect? Number, but I'm doing the work. Work? Joy laughed sharply. You mean being rich and feeling guilty about it? That's not work, that's image management. At that moment, Sunny Hostin leaned forward, clearly uncomfortable. Look, I think there's value in talking about how people in the spotlight can influence public opinion for good. Joy ignored her. This is what drives people nuts, Julia. You sit in your palatial homes with solar panels on the roof and think it makes you better. Then you scold everyday people for not doing enough when most of them are just trying to afford groceries. Julia's voice dropped, no longer angry but sad, heavy even. That's not what I'm doing, Joy. You've twisted everything. My activism has never been about shaming people. It's about doing what I can with what I have and trying to inspire others, not guilt them. But that's just it, Joy pressed. You think inspiration is enough. Meanwhile, your carbon footprint is the size of Vermont. There was a beat. Julia turned slightly, looking not at Joy now, but at the audience. You want to know why I care so much? Why I do this? Because I have kids. Because I've seen the planet changing before my eyes. I've been to places where the glaciers used to reach the water, and now they don't. I've stood in forests that are now ash. I've held children who don't have clean water. She paused. And because I can do something, I do. Not because it's perfect. Not because it fixes everything, but because pretending nothing's wrong is worse. The sincerity in her voice created a shift in the room. The bravado, the showbiz sheen, the talk show gloss, it all melted away for a moment, leaving just the raw urgency in her words. Joy wasn't ready to back down. So what? You think you're some kind of saint now? Julia turned to face her fully again. Number, I think I'm someone trying, and I think that's more than I can say for what you've done here today. Whoopi finally spoke. Her voice, raspy and firm, cut through the tension. Okay, ladies, let's bring this back down to earth. We've clearly got strong opinions, but this is starting to feel like something else. Joy held up her hands. Hey, I'm just asking the questions everyone else is too afraid to. No, Julia said, you're not asking questions. You're attacking. There's a difference. The silence that followed was thick. Sunny looked down at her notes. Alyssa tried to make eye contact with someone, anyone. The camera stayed wide, catching the entire table, as if uncertain which face to focus on next. Joy spoke again, quieter now, but with an edge that still cut. You don't like being called out, that's the truth. You live in a world where everyone claps when you say anything, and the moment someone pushes back, suddenly it's an attack. I've been pushed back on my whole life, Julia said. You know, being underestimated is practically the background noise of being a woman in Hollywood, but I've never let that stop me from speaking up when it matters, even if it makes people uncomfortable. That's convenient, Joy muttered. Julia took a step back from the table. Her energy wasn't explosive, it was resolved. I didn't come here for this. I came to talk about a project that matters to me, about the climate crisis, about the future we're handing our children, but apparently that's too out of touch for daytime TV. Whoopi exhaled slowly. All right, we're going to go to a break. But Julia wasn't done. She turned to the audience again. I want you all to hear this. Not from a press release or a filtered photo, but from me. I know I'm lucky. I know I have access and resources that most people don't. That's exactly why I feel obligated to act. If that bothers people, that's something they need to examine, not me. The applause came slowly, but it came, scattered at first, then more. It wasn't the usual enthusiastic clapping for a beloved movie star. It was more reflective, thoughtful. People weren't just reacting, they were processing. Julia turned toward the table one last time. You don't have to agree with me, but don't mistake cynicism for clarity. Tearing things down is easy. Helping build something better is harder, and I choose to do the hard thing. As she sat back down, the tension remained in the air, but the temperature had changed. She hadn't shouted, but her words rang louder than anything Joy had said all morning. The show faded to commercial, the theme music playing out as the studio lights dimmed just slightly, but the energy in the room hadn't reset. Not really. This was no longer just a celebrity interview. This was a confrontation of values, of voices, of what it means to try, and to be publicly judged for it. Gone was the playful rhythm of the first half of the interview, replaced now by a quieter, tenser energy. Julia Roberts sat upright but composed, her famous smile nowhere to be seen. Her hands were folded neatly in front of her, her eyes sharp and focused. Joy Behar, too, had settled, still defiant but less animated, her earlier smirk now a tighter line across her face. Whoopi Goldberg glanced down at her cue cards, then looked directly at the camera. We're back, she said simply, her tone neutral but weighted. Before the break, we were having a, passionate conversation with Julia Roberts about activism, responsibility, and public perception. We're going to try and steer this back to the film and give everyone a chance to breathe. Alyssa Farah Griffin jumped in, eager to help. The movie is a powerful one, and whether you agree with Julia's views or not, there's no denying that it shines a spotlight on climate issues in a compelling way. Julia nodded politely, appreciative of the attempt to pivot, but the moment hung in the air unresolved. Then Sunny Hostin, gently but directly, turned to Julia. Can I ask something that's not about the film, but not a fight either? Julia gave a small smile. Sure. You've been in the public eye for decades, Sunny said. Beloved by millions, rarely controversial, but today, you pushed back. Hard. Was that intentional, or did something just snap? Julia considered her words, then she leaned in slightly. I didn't come here intending to argue, she said, but I also didn't come here to sit quietly while my work was dismissed as vanity. People assume that if you're successful or famous or privileged, you lose the right to care deeply about something. That if you live a comfortable life, your concerns must be performative. That's exhausting. She paused. The audience was silent, listening intently. I've spent years trying to use whatever influence I have for good, she continued. Not to be praised, not to be right, but because I have kids. Because I've looked into the eyes of families losing everything to floods and fires and drought. And if that makes me a hypocrite for not being perfect, then I'll own that. But I'd rather be an imperfect person trying to help than a comfortable one doing nothing but criticizing. Joy spoke again, not as sharply this time, but with a tone that still cut. But isn't there something to be said for walking the walk? You say you care about emissions and climate justice, but you live a life of excess. Jets, yachts, designer campaigns. Don't you see how that creates a disconnect? Julia nodded. I do. I think about it constantly. I agonize over every flight, every job that requires travel, every decision that impacts my footprint. But I also know that individual lifestyle changes aren't enough to solve a global crisis. We need policy change, systemic shifts, and yes, massive public engagement. That's where I try to help, not by pretending I'm a saint, but by trying to get more people to care. Joy raised an eyebrow. So you think awareness is enough? I think awareness is the beginning, Julia said. It's the crack in the dam. Real change takes time, effort, cooperation, and sometimes it starts with uncomfortable conversations, like this one. Alyssa nodded slowly. I may not agree with everything, but I respect that. Whoopi glanced at Joy, then back at Julia. It's true what you said earlier. None of us are perfect, but here's the thing. People are tired of being talked down to, even when the message is important. That's the challenge, bridging that gap. I get that, Julia said, but you also can't let fear of being imperfect silence you. If only perfect people are allowed to speak, we'll be left with silence. Or worse, only the loudest, most cynical voices. Joy seemed to soften slightly. But doesn't it ever feel hollow? Like the industry you're in eats up so much resources, attention, money, and then turns around and lectures people about restraint? Every day, Julia admitted. But that's why I push from within, why I fund sustainability in production, why I insist on offsetting emissions during shoots, why I choose projects that say something. I know Hollywood isn't innocent, but walking away from it wouldn't fix anything. Staying and changing it, that might. There was something raw and honest in her voice now. The studio, often filled with chatter and live energy, remained hushed. Sunny asked, have you always been this engaged? Or did something shift for you personally? Julia nodded slowly, her voice quieter now. Years ago, I was filming in Africa. Beautiful place, gorgeous landscapes. But while we were there, the village we stayed near ran out of water. Literally ran out. They were rationing it, drinking from muddy wells. And we were on a set with bottled water and generators and trailers with showers. I've never forgotten that. It changed me. She looked down for a second, collecting herself. Since then, I've tried, imperfectly, inconsistently at times, but tried to be more aware, more involved, more accountable, not to be praised, but because I couldn't live with doing nothing. Joy didn't respond right away. When she finally spoke, her voice was noticeably less confrontational. That's a fair answer. Julia turned to her. I'm not here to silence criticism, but there's a difference between questioning someone's methods and attacking their motives. Joy didn't disagree. Whoopi clapped her hands lightly once. All right, well, that was about the most intense Tuesday morning we've had in a while. Laughter broke out, relieved, if a bit nervous. The audience relaxed again, just slightly. The pressure had dialed down, not all the way, but enough for a return to familiar footing. The host took a breath. Julia leaned back, visibly less tense, but still holding a quiet fire in her expression. Sunny smiled. We'll be right back with more from Julia Roberts, this time hopefully with fewer fireworks and more about the actual movie. Julia chuckled. That'd be nice. And just like that, the cameras panned out as the theme music faded in again. But backstage and in living rooms across the country, people weren't forgetting what they just witnessed. This wasn't just a promo appearance anymore. It had become something else entirely, a rare moment when image collided with identity, and where one of the most famously composed women in Hollywood chose not to be agreeable, but to be real. If you like this video, then subscribe.